the 75th anniversary of Captain Mantell sacrificing his life chasing unidentified flying object on January the 7th, 1948. And if you had any curiosity about was it very well known, Terry, who I'll introduce in a second, and I, particularly last Saturday on the 7th, he was going through Twitter and I was looking at Facebook, the comments, the posts that were being made worldwide. And I think he said he talked with somebody in Bangladesh. There was a post from Chile. There was one from Greece. There was one from Italy. Air Force people all over the United States. I talked with somebody back and forth from Canada who is doing a podcast, and Eric says he's going to did the podcast with him after I hooked them up. So it's really a well-known event. It's kind of like one of those things to the people next door to us in Franklin. Have they ever heard of it? Probably not, but maybe. But yet it was really well known worldwide. And so we're fortunate to have the grandsons actually of Captain Mantell, who were here back in the fall of 2021 when Discovery Channel Discovery Channel Plus did a video. And they did a 2-hour video, and about 8 minutes of that is from Franklin. That's on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, you need to look it up because it's really good. They filmed it here and on location with eyewitnesses. So it's good. And so we're fortunate to have Terry Mantell, who came from Louisville, and then we've got Eric Mantell, also, who's behind me, looking over my shoulder, and he's in Atlanta and couldn't come up for the weeknight, but he came here. And then we also have eyewitnesses with us. We have Joe Phillips, who you're going to hear from all of these in a few minutes. Joe Phillips and Patsy Phillips, his sister, and also the wife of Doyle Burnett, who's also here. And all three of those were eyewitnesses. And I think they weren't more than 30 years old back then, 75 years. Oh, no. Actually, they were real little 75 years ago. But first, we have several proclamations that have been made and will be presented. And the first, I'm going to call on Sandy Simpson, who is the district director for Congressman James Comer, who's busy at work and couldn't fly down from Washington just to see us tonight. So, and she's got a resolution, something that was read in the congressional record. So I'll let her share that.
Okay. My remarks are going to be very brief because I'm eager to listen to the story that Terry's going to tell regarding his grandfather and the great adventure that he was on 75 years ago. But as James Henry said, I'm here on behalf of Congressman Comer. The congressman apologizes that he cannot be here this evening. As you well know, he was elected to Congress, so that's where he's at. He's in Washington, D.C. And if you've turned on the TV or a radio, you know he's quite busy. But he did want me to be here tonight and to say to all of you all, thank you for what you do. And before I present this congressional record, I have to catch my breath for a second, but I just want to say this is the most beautiful facility, the most beautiful building, and the history that's stored here. I just want to say on behalf of Congressman Comer, thank you for allowing this wonderful facility, History Center, to be built. I understand the county has spent a lot of time and dedication to make this happen, along with James Henry and the entire board. So thank you all for making this possible. What I've brought here tonight is a congressional record. And if you don't know what a congressional record is, the congressman, and thank you to James Henry for the invitation, but when the congressman found out through James Henry's invitation, he wanted to do something to recognize what Captain Mantell did. So he went to the floor of the House of the United States Representatives and made the comments that are on this. So at this time, I would like to present this to Terry and to your family.
Thank you so much.
It's quite lengthy, so I didn't stand here and take time to read it, but I'm sure Terry will be glad to share this with everyone this evening. And thank you all for inviting the Congressman's office, and thank you all for allowing me to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, and please extend our thanks to the Congressman. State Senator Mike Wilson is from Bowling Green, and if you haven't met him, Right now, he's the best state senator we've got because he's the only one that represents Simpson County. But he has got a resolution, or he can just say what it is, from the General Assembly, and he's also done a joint one on behalf of State Representative Sean McPherson. Sean would have been here tonight, there's no question in my mind, except that he has recently had surgery and was in the hospital quite some time, and he's still recovering at home. So please keep him in your prayers. And I'll go ahead and mention, unless he comes in late, our Vice President, Charles McCutcheon, had a procedure done in the hospital, just a simple one, but he said he might be too drowsy to walk when he came in tonight. So he probably won't be here either. But Senator Wilson?
First of all, thank you all for being here and having me here. It's truly an honor for me to present a citation that's put together by myself in the Senate and then Sean McPherson out of the House. Unfortunately, he could not be here tonight. He just got over some surgery and just got released back home and is recovering. But what we did was a joint citation from both the Senate and the House, and that's what I'm going to present tonight. Also, I read into the record on the Senate floor is a resolution so that it made sure that it got into the record. And I brought that copy, is just right over there, to leave here to be in the museum, Historical Society Museum. And so again, I'm going to read this to you. It says, the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, to all to whom these presents shall come greetings. Know ye that Captain Thomas Francis Mantell, Jr. is mourned on this day, the 75th anniversary of his passing, and is recognized by the members of this honorable body as a distinguished citizen who made many lasting contributions to his family, friends, community, and nation before his untimely death on January 7, 1948. An unidentified flying object, UFO, was reported at several locations around Kentucky and Ohio, including by the state police to the control tower at Godman Army Airfield at Fort Knox. The tower asked Captain Mantell and his squadron of P-51 Mustangs to investigate. Captain Mantell is said to have reported a glowing metallic object of tremendous size. He bravely pursued the object despite the danger until his plane began to spiral and tragically crashed to the ground, resulting in his death. There remains today no evidence as to what was being pursued, though many speculate that the crash and Captain Mantell's death could have been caused by extraterrestrials. Captain Mantell was a decorated officer with the Army Air Corps, had flown at Normandy on D-Day, and despite the official report which attributes his death to possible lack of oxygen due to altitude, many believe that he was far too experienced a pilot to have died because of error or unnecessary risk. Though we may never know what he saw and pursued, Mantell believed it was a danger to his country and sought to protect his fellow Americans at all costs. The incident is among the best known and most publicized UFO incident of the late 1940s. It has been commemorated with a historic monument erected by the Simpson County Historical Society and has been explored in many articles, books, videos, and documentaries, inasmuch as Captain Thomas Francis Mantell, Jr. was a soldier and a patriot of the highest caliber who served his country tirelessly with tremendous bravery and heroism. He is remembered for his sacrifices he made on behalf of his fellow citizens, is profoundly missed by all those whose lives were touched by his presence, and on the motion of Senator Mike Wilson and Representative Sean McPherson, is hereby deemed by this honorable body most worthy of its remembrance. Done in Frankfort, Kentucky, this 17th day of January in the year 2023. Signed by the President of the Senate, Robert Stivers, and the Speaker of the House, David Osborne. So I have a copy of this for the museum and have a copy of this for the family that I would leave with you. And certainly I'm proud to be here to read this to you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wilson. County Judge Executive Mason Barnes also has a proclamation to make.
All right. Thank you, James Henry, and thank you all for coming out tonight. It's a good crowd. This is one of the biggest crowds I've ever seen at a historic society gathering. So glad to see all of y'all here. We see what it takes now to get people out to hear something. Things we're trying to figure out what happened.
Curious to know where some of them flew in from.
Right here in Simpson County. But I will say one thing, as I've done a little reading about Captain Mantell, I found out that this man at a young age was one of, if not maybe the most experienced pilot that we had in that day. So what happened that day, we may never know, but we know that the chances that there was human error were pretty slim, because all accounts and all records, Captain Mantell was top-notch pilot in that day. So I do want to share a proclamation that we have on behalf of the Simpson County Fiscal Court, and it starts out that whereas Thomas F. Mantell was born on June 30th, 1922 in Franklin, Kentucky, and whereas Thomas F. Mantell went on to be a highly decorated Army Air Corps captain flying missions in Normandy and on D-Day during World War II, where he earned the Distinguished Flying Cross badge for heroism. And whereas on January 7th, 1948, an unidentified flying object, a UFO, was spotted in the skies in Kentucky and surrounding states, to which Captain Mantell was dispatched to investigate the sighting. And whereas Captain Mantell pursued the UFO until his P-51 Mustang fighter plane ultimately spiraled to a crash in South Simpson County, resulting in the death of the much decorated war hero. Now, therefore, in honor and recognition of Captain Thomas F. Mantell's dedication and commitment to serving our country with such courage and bravery, I, Mason Barnes, Simpson County Judge Executive, do hereby proclaim Saturday, January 7th, 2023 as Captain Thomas F. Mantell Day in Simpson County, Kentucky.
Thank you, Mason. And I will mention, if you have not seen it, we do have a small display in the back, and then we have a larger Mantell display that's a permanent display back in the museum. Mayor Larry Freese let me know, excuse me, I did that once before. Larry Dixon will probably be upset with me. Sorry about that. Mayor Larry Dixon, don't tell him. Yeah, don't tell him. Mayor Larry Dixon came in at the last minute and said something had come up where he was not able to attend tonight, but we were fortunate that our Dewey City Commissioner, Dale McQuarrie, is here tonight, and he's getting to make his first presentation on behalf of the city.
Cousin.
Thank you.
You are in so much trouble.
James Henry and I, we talk pretty much every day on Facebook Messenger, talk about the Historical Society. James Henry does an outstanding job. He deserves a lot of recognition that he doesn't get timeless hours put in here. Beautiful facility, but now I got one on you. All right. I was asked to give this proclamation like James Henry said. Mayor Dixon couldn't be here tonight. I'm going to read a portion of it because the other gentleman covered most of it. Whereas Captain Thomas Francis Mantell Jr. was a United States Air Force officer and World War II veteran, during his military career he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for courageous action and heroism and an Air Medal for aerial achievements. Whereas Captain Thomas Francis Mantell Jr. was a United States Air Force officer and World War II veteran, during his military career he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for courageous action and heroism and an Air Medal for aerial achievements. Today we gather to honor Captain Thomas Francis Mantell Jr. as he gave his life protecting this country. Now therefore, speaking for Mayor Dixon and the City Commission, we do hereby proclaim January 7th, 2023 as Captain Thomas Francis Mantell Jr. Day.
Thank you, Dale. And as we mentioned, after Captain Mantell left the Army Air Force, he joined the newly formed Kentucky Air National Guard and was actually their first fatality. We do have a representative with us tonight from the Kentucky Air National Guard, Jose Lopez. And would you like to say anything?
I'll say something.
Okay, you can't pass it up. I think he's recruiting, so he probably has the papers out in the car if you're interested.
Thank y'all for having me. So, like you said, I'm Technical Sergeant Jose Lopez Castro. I've been in the Kentucky Air National Guard for about 13 years now, and previously I was an aircraft maintainer. So we have the C-130Js, so we have the P-51 Mustangs and the F-4s, and then the C-130s, which we currently have. So when Terry gave us a call a few weeks ago, I thought it was really important for us to come out. It's a couple-hour drive from Louisville, but trying to make the most of it, see the town and everything like that. So I think it was really important for us to be a part of this and to try to bring back some information and ideally have Terry out and his crew out to the base to just really bring it all together, about representing his family and the legacy that he's trying to do today. Thank you.
Did I leave anybody out that wanted to make a presentation? No? Okay, we do have somebody from Senator Paul's office.
Representative for U.S. Senator Rand Paul. Do not have a personal record, but he sends his request not being able to attend, and I did pass along a personal note from him to Terry and the Mantell family. Thank you.
Thank you. I missed that. I knew that Terry said he had talked with your office, so thank you for coming too. If there are no others, then I'm going to turn the program over to Terry Mantell. And Terry said he would introduce his brother. I had to make sure that he didn't forget that. No, not really. Yeah, actually, really. But that's all right. And then he's going to call on Joe and Doyle and Patsy to make some comments and within his talk. And I know he promised to be out by midnight. So, thank you.
All right.
Thanks. Before I start talking, I want to introduce this guy. He's my older brother, Eric Mantell. He knows a lot about the case. It's very close to his heart. He really appreciates being down here for the Discovery Show as well. So, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can talk a little bit, and then I'll hop back in.
First of all, I want to just absolutely thank everyone for coming out tonight, all of the dignitaries, those that are here as well as those not. All of the proclamations really just touch our hearts. Dr. Snyder and what the Franklin Historical Center have done in terms of bringing the awareness of our grandfather to the public. Again, we just thank them a million times, and just overwhelmed at this, and looking forward to hear my brother talk. He's carried most of the legwork with this, and so definitely looking forward to hearing him talk. Again, just want to thank everyone who's participated in this. Some have come a long way. The time and the effort put in to this proclamation and recognition, we can't thank you enough.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. You be able to keep that on so you can watch it or hear?
Yeah, I don't know how much time we got left on the meeting.
Okay.
It's time.
It's timed out.
Yes.
So Eric, you might drop, but we'll be thinking about you. I wanted to, and we have names, but faith's very important in my family, so I don't know if I could open up with a prayer. Would that be
Please. Yeah, please do.
Thanks. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. What a way to remember my grandfather, Thomas Mantell. I want to thank you for the hope that you give, because that's what our family has had for 75 years now since they lost Tommy. So I just want to ask you to bless the people that came out here today. I know everybody's always going through something, or about to go in something, or they're coming out of something. And we always need that hope, that peace, and that joy that you offer. So I just really thank you for this day. Thank you for letting everybody get here. Thank you for just for this day. I pray that everybody gets home safe, and we can all draw closer to you. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen.
Thank you
Amen.
for letting me do that, guys. Like Eric said, I want to thank you so much. I mean, if I look over at this table and see everything that, and I could get emotional, but. It means a lot. Our family, 75 years, is weird. I mean, try to give a human aspect of the story. I mean, try to go through the story. But 75 years ago, Thomas Mantell died. Growing up, my dad was only not even 2 years old when it happened. And he always was affected by it. Of course, my grandmother lived to be over age of 92, 93. Eric could probably correct me because he's a memory whiz on dates. So she lived a long life. She remarried. She had 2 kids. One of them is actually a missionary in Indonesia for the last 30 years. So it's amazing how God works, right? So when we go back to that faith aspect of, we don't know why things happen. We don't know what the answers why things happen, but they do happen, and it's how we respond. So Tommy, at a young age, loved planes. He went from Louisville, went to Mill High School, met my grandmother, and fell in love. Perfect so far, right? And then he went over to war. He wanted to fly. He wanted to fly fighter planes in World War II, but he couldn't do it because he's too tall. And, you know, I'm a little tall myself, so he couldn't fly the fighter plane. So he flew and Eric, if you can still talk, what plane was it?
The C-47, which they principally towed the gliders which carry the paratroopers on their missions. The later version of the C-47 would be known as the DC-9.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this is a big plane that he was flying. And what he did then was he flew the gliders. You know anything about gliders, they're pretty much at it's whatever the pilot's going to do is where they're going to end up, right? Because they fly in behind enemy lines. It was D-Day. You have a lot of German Nazi anti-aircraft going on, a lot of flak. And basically, the pilots were instructed, if you get hit and if you're hit too far or bad, release and return. Well, he got hit, and he got hit real bad. I don't know how many people have seen the actual plane of what it looked like in a return, but the story is almost greater than the UFO story, because I don't see how he did it. Apparently, he was on fire. He made his mark, made it back safe, and he got the Distinguished Flying Cross, which very proud of that. Very proud of it. It just kind of shows what kind of person he was, right? So he died when he was 25. When I was 25, I hadn't accomplished what he accomplished for sure. Big shoes to walk in. So the family was very proud. He came back, but he still wanted to fly. My grandmother always says she wanted Tommy to get a 9-to-5 job, but he wanted to fly. He wanted to fly. So he got the Air National Guard. Kentucky Air National Guard was just forming, so he went ahead and got that. And what was so good about that is he got to fly the P-51s, which if you're a kid and you want to fly the fastest, baddest plane, the P-51's probably it. So it's a Mustang in the sky. So he was happy. He was doing that. I'm going to kind of walk through the story of January 7th. Some people might know it. Some people may not know all of it. But what happened was, and it's real important when we go into this story, is this wasn't some guy that was flying a prop plane over some fields and just decided to chase something, okay? Military. He was a military. He's still in the military. January 7th, 1948, there was calls across Kentucky that there was something, people were seeing something in the air. Police stations were getting over flood. So what do the police stations do? They call Common Field, Fort Knox. We got something. We're getting all these reports. Somebody's seeing something in the air. Can you guys check it out? They checked it out. They saw it. Now, the TV show Sightings, if you haven't watched it, they've done 2 great series on probably the best TV show that has ever been made about it. It's about 15 minutes long. They did it back in 1996, 95, around that area. The first show, they just talked to our family. We came out to the field. We actually found some bits and pieces of the plane. I don't know if you remember that when we first did that back in like 95. People saw that. There was a Quentin Blackwell that was a control air tire on January 7, 1948. He saw that the plea of the family, because our whole family was like, what happened to Tommy? We never heard anything from the government, unfortunately, except there was a few theories of chasing Venus. Then there was a theory of a weather balloon. There was theories that he was kind of doing his own thing and he went too high up. We never really got the answers, unfortunately. And I get it. They might have been scared to know whatever they did see that the public couldn't handle it, or they didn't know what they saw and they didn't know how to handle it. I think everybody tries to do the best they can in that situation. I'm sure they was in a tough spot with a decorated World War II pilot that the war had just not been over for that long, and now he was dead. Blackwell saw that show and he said, I want to talk to family. So my dad, who was living, he passed away 2 years ago of COVID. My Tommy's sister, Aunt Betty, she's passed away, and then my Uncle Tommy, which was my dad's oldest brother, they all went to Oklahoma and saw Blackwell. Blackwell was at an age where he didn't care. He was just going to talk and say, this is what happened. So basically what happened on that day, this is an eyewitness that was in the control tower at Fort Knox. They saw something. They grabbed the binoculars. The first guy couldn't figure it out. In the military, if you don't know the answers, you're going to go higher up, right? So they brought someone else to the base. Saw it, couldn't figure it out. They brought higher that day. One colonel and the base commander, Dix. None of them knew what it was. At that time, our grandfather was flying back from Marietta, Georgia, just on a practice mission, P-51, there's 4 planes. They radioed him and said, look, can you check it out? So he was instructed to check this out. He didn't just fly, he didn't just see something decide, he was going to chase it. He'd be military, if you're told to do something, you do it. He chased it. He was in conversation with Blackwell the whole time. Blackwell said in the interview that he's talked to a lot of people that have lost conscious because they've gone too high. And he said to his best knowledge and his experience, Tommy Mantell was incoherent the whole time he was flying. He said it was huge, metallic, going in for a closer look. He even told our family that there was reports that there's an observation deck on it. Last words was, I'm going in for a closer look, and then he crashed and burned. So that's the story leading up to the eyewitnesses. So if they want to come up real quick, we've got Joe, Patsy, and Doyle. If you guys want to come up, introduce yourself real quick, and maybe tell your explanation of that day. Appreciate it.
Everyone, I misspoke. The C-47 was like a DC-3. I think I said DC-9, so I need to correct myself. It was similar to the DC-3. What our grandfather flew in World War II.
A lot of y'all know me. I've been around Franklin a long time. Got to think now, I was 6 years old at the time. So you're listening to a 6-year-old. We were eating popcorn in the house, the best I remember, when something similar today would be a sonic boom. So I just got lucky and run to the right window. A lot of people say, did you see it coming down? No, I didn't see it coming down. I see it when you done that. Smoke, around it, no fire. Well, I don't figure there's any gas that had already broke off from the plane or whatever. But I do remember people come from everywhere. And back in that day, a 6-year-old, you was lucky if you seen 3 people a week, because you didn't go anywhere. And I do remember our neighbors up the road were probably the first ones I see go down the field. And they took his body from the plane, covered him up with a parachute. And of course, I was immediately I want to go down there. Mother said, no. I didn't go to school that day. I was sick, seemed like. But I didn't get to go till the next day, which they done moved the body. And I can remember the crowd that was there within 30 or 40 minutes. But people told me they seen it from Portland. It was a clear day, and it was so high in the air that people seen this thing from Cross Plains, Orlando, Milton, everywhere. They come to see what it was. But they were just seemed like hundreds of people there. And they did not move the plane. I don't know when it was moved because I was in school the day it was moved. But I can remember as a 6-year-old seeing what the property looked like after all those people had been there. Fire trucks had cut fences in 2 or 3 different places. It was a warm time of year when they moved the plane, and it left tremendous ruts in the field from there to the road. And it was only about 100 yards from the house to the plane, and about 50 yards or less to the road. But they took it straight out to the road. And you got to remember, back then, this was 1947, and we didn't have a tractor till 48. So Daddy had to work that down with mules. So that's how I can remember
So I want to say he's been very generous. He's always, we've been out there 2 or 3 times.
I sold it in '83, but I'm still pretty tight
With him, okay.
Yeah.
You never had told us we can't come out there.
No.
So I appreciate that. And then,
I can't tell you a lot. Joe has told you most everything, and it was a winter day, and like I said, he was home from school, and I remember he was eating popcorn, and my mother was trying to entertain him by playing checkers, and we were, at first, there was all kinds of things hitting the roof of the house. It sounded worse than any hailstorm I'd ever heard. So we immediately left our seats and went to the window. And I remember looking out, and of course there was insulation and pieces of the plane falling, small pieces. And I stayed at that window till it turned dark that day. So later on, when I was allowed to go out, I remember that summer we played with the small aluminum pieces that had come from that plane. Mother didn't want us to. I think she thought they were radioactive. And of course, like you said, the roads were packed with people. And my father was in town, and he was coming home, and I can only imagine what he thought when he got that near to the farm and saw that many people. I think that's all I know. Thank you.
Well, I'm Dewey Burnett, and I remember in 1948, I was 7 years old almost. And my father and grandfather, my grandfather's old 36 Chevrolet used to come out and pick me up at the road because we were on the Witt Road, and our farm was back off the road. So they would just come out to pick me up, and I was walking toward the car when we heard this big noise. And so we all looked up, and you could see the plane coming down, and it was spinning. And one wing came off of the plane and went in Willie Black's farm by his pond. The tail section went down, we could see it fall off, and then we heard the plane crash. So we immediately got in the car, and I guess we were probably the first people there, because I never will forget, there was a few neighbors walking across the field, and we were there, saw the plane. And I'm standing as close up here to you from the plane, looking at it, and I remember seeing the pilot sitting in the plane, and I thought, well, maybe he's just going to get up and walk out, you know. He was still strapped in. I remember one boot being beside the plane, and he had the other boot on. I remember Harry Booker coming by in a little bit and take him out of the plane, and they put the parachute over him at that point in time, and so that was about it. But I was one of the few people that was first on the scene, saw everything. I remember to this day, trust me, never forget something like that. Okay, that's all.
How amazing is it that there's 3 people that still, I don't know what's in the water down here, guys. That's 75 years ago, and they look like they're 63. It's amazing. I want to give a lot of thanks to James, to all the guys that work here. I mean, this place is fantastic. You guys should have a lot of pride into it. This is one of the nicest museum, historical, classy, perfect. This place is perfect, so you guys are really blessed that you have this in your county, and you can be part of it. I want to kind of share a little bit what's going on within our family now. Where do we go now? It's been 75 years. In the last year alone, I really have tried to push it. I try to push the story, one, for Kentucky. This is one of Kentucky's own. First, Air National Guard Field and Service. So I'm really pushed, and I think, again, that's why it's so much that he's been recognized. It's almost, I just don't know what my grandmother and my dad and my Uncle Tommy would be thinking right now. They'd be so proud of him being recognized. So I've been really trying to get him recognized within the state of Kentucky. I also will hop on any show that I can. I did that podcast that's going to release tomorrow. It's a UFO podcast. Again, I'm not saying I'm a UFO all into the UFO. I don't know what it was, but I do know whatever he chased that day was a threat to the United States over the United States soil. And for that, he should be remembered. I did a podcast, I did a radio show over the summer out of New York City on WABC. We did the Discovery Plus show. And then The Sun, which the news publication The Sun from over in England, they ran a really nice interview. I know they can get a bad rep, but they did a fantastic interview with me and really broke down his military record as well over the summer. So that's basically what's been going on the last year. Just keep on trying to let people remember who Terry Mantell was, or Thomas Mantell was. You remember who I was too, but he's more than me. Next go is I really, really, really want to get it out in Hollywood and get a movie made for it. Because I don't think you can find a better movie based on a true story of love with my grandmother. Who doesn't love love? I'm a big sucker for love. It's everything. So if you have love, you have everything. But it had love, you have World War II, D-Day, and then you have The Chase. I just don't think Hollywood could script a better movie, and it's a true story. I don't know if James, if there's anybody that has any questions you want to ask me as being part of the family, I can try to share and answer it the best I can. If you do have any, if you don't, I just wanted to kind of open it up to the floor.
Is there any explanation of why the plane broke apart?
Well, what the Air Force says is when he lost conscious, or he starts spiraling and just kind of broke apart. Now, again, he could have got something closest to something, and it decided to take off, and he got caught in the exhaust. And because there was radiation found on bits of the plane that we found back in the late 90s. I'm not sure. I will say that there was this guy that flew with him, and it was his friend, and he said, Thomas Mantell, a lot of people made him out to be like not playboy, but like a Maverick or a Top Gun, and I'm sure if you're 25 years old and you're flying a P-51, you're going to feel pretty good about yourself. Mm-hmm. I know I would. Yeah. And so I'm sure he was a stud in his own, rightfully so. I don't have pictures up anymore, but he said he never met a pilot that was more cautious or knew more about his planes. And he said he knew without a question if he went above 20,000 feet, he was going to pass out because that plane just did not have oxygen. He took that risk, and his friend said he took that risk because he thought it was bigger than his family, and bigger than his life because it was serious. And again, he was instructed by the Air Force to follow it. So I'm not sure why it fell apart.
Because I was wondering if any of the eyewitnesses saw anything else besides his plane, if they saw anything above, anything else at all.
I can speak for you guys. I think based on it happened, they was doing their thing and it was a sound, and then they basically heard the plane so. And if I'm wrong, you can correct me.
You're right.
Okay.
I remember Glenn Mays was in here a couple of years ago, was in his 90s at the time and now deceased, and he said that he watched the plane explode in midair. That he did see it explode in midair as it was coming down. He was old enough that he's actually one of the few that I can identify in the main picture that shows the crash on the ground.
Yeah.
I have a question that kind of ties to this lady's question as well. So maybe the eyewitnesses didn't see anything other than the plane, but did they hear any accounts? And it was mentioned that it was saw in Portland and Orlando and Cross Plains. How long had they been seeing it before the crash occurred, and how long did it take to depart after the object itself that he was chasing after?
Based on the reports that I know, the first call came in about 1:07 afternoon, p.m., January blue skies, whole day. So about 1:07, I think, is when the first call came to Fort Knox. The podcast I was on last night that will be ready for the public tomorrow, this guy does a time by time. I mean, if you really want to know the time by time, okay, 1:10, this sergeant came in, 1:11, the general whatever came in, 1:15. So basically, it came around about, I could be wrong, about 2. It might have been a full 45, 50 minutes, and it could have been 1:45 when Thomas Mantell started chasing it. And I believe the chase went on for about 30, 40 minutes. What's interesting about that is, you know what happened 6 months prior to January 7th, 1948, to the day?
Yeah, UFO.
Roswell happened. And if you look at it, it's just amazing when you look at the late 40s, the technology exploded. So I don't know exactly, again, I don't know what was going on. I know we came out of World War II. I know our technology was booming. But if you look at that late 40s up until where we are now, it is amazing how much technology has changed and how much it's grown so fast. It just blows me away. Was it something from those Project Blue Books? Because Mantell's case was one of the top 3. It was in the Project Blue Book. Was it something? I'm not sure. But that's if you listen to the podcast, it'd be the time, because I don't want to get anything wrong.
What's the name of the podcast?
It's called UFO Talker, I think. UFO Talker, one word. Now, on Facebook, I did create a Captain Thomas Mantell Facebook page, and I'm going to have the link on there, and I know James posts on there, and but if you type in Captain Thomas Mantell, a picture of him in a plane, and I post all the stuff on there. But I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
So when they contacted him, he was in the air
Yes.
on a practice mission. How far away was he?
He was coming up from Marietta, Georgia, so he wasn't there for very long. And you know, there was reports that Blackwell, and I let this out earlier, but Blackwell said when they had the interview out in Oklahoma, again, he was a control tower, that Mantell radioed in, and because there was reports that always said, why did the wingman leave him? There was reports that he was low on fuel. There was reports that they lost him. They couldn't see him. There was reports of this. Well, Blackwell said they left him because Mantell ordered for hot guns. Military hot guns is a word that you use when we're going to equip the P-51s to shoot whatever. It's serious business. My grandfather, I always say Mantell, I'm not trying to talk into the third person, but Thomas requested them, but he couldn't give it the okay. Someone just don't have that much power. You probably would agree, right? So he requested it. So people in the tower said yes, and that's where his wingman came back. I also found it very interesting. You can find so many reports on this case, so many people's documents and what they're saying and what happened. And if anybody has one, let me know. But I have yet to see an interview with the wingman. Why isn't there an interview with the wingman? They was the closest to him, chasing whatever he was chasing. So it's just a lot of stuff like that we're still searching for answers. We got a lot of answers, and again, Blackwell didn't gain nothing from his interview with his family. He just saw that by fire that day. One colonel and the base commander, Dix. None of them knew what it was. At that time, our grandfather was flying back from Marietta, Georgia, just on a practice mission, P-51, there's 4 planes. They radioed him and said, look, can you check it out? So he was instructed to check this out. He didn't just fly, he didn't just see something decide, he was going to chase it. He'd be military, if you're told to do something, you do it. He chased it. He was in conversation with Blackwell the whole time. Blackwell said in the interview that he's talked to a lot of people that have lost conscious because they've gone too high. And he said to his best knowledge and his experience, Tommy Mantell was incoherent the whole time he was flying. He said it was huge, metallic, going in for a closer look. He even told her family that there was reports that there's an observation deck on it. Last words was, I'm going in for a closer look, and then he crashed in Franklin. So that's the story leading up to the eyewitnesses. So if they want to come up real quick, we've got Joe, Patsy, and Doyle. If you guys want to come up, introduce yourself real quick, and maybe tell your explanation of that day. Appreciate it.
Everyone, I misspoke. The C-47 was like a DC-3. I think I said DC-9, so I need to correct myself. It was similar to the DC-3. What our grandfather flew in World War II.
A lot of y'all know me. I've been around Franklin a long time. Got to think now, I was 6 years old at the time. So you're listening to a 6-year-old. We were eating popcorn in the house, the best I remember, when something similar today would be a sonic boom. So I just got lucky and run to the right window. A lot of people say, did you see it coming down? No, I didn't see it coming down. I see it when you done that. Smoke around it, no fire. Well, I don't figure there's any gas that had already broke off from the plane or whatever. But I do remember people come from everywhere. And back in that day, a 6-year-old, you was lucky if you seen 3 people a week. You didn't go anywhere. And I do remember our neighbors up the road were probably the first ones I see go down the field. And they took his body from the plane, covered him up with a parachute. And of course, I was immediately, I want to go down there. Mother said, no. I didn't go to school that day. I was sick, seemed like. But I didn't get to go till the next day, which they done moved the body. And I can remember the crowd that was there within 30 or 40 minutes. But people told me they seen it from Portland. It was a clear day, and it was so high in the air that people seen this thing from Cross Plains, Orlando, Milton, everywhere. They come to see what it was. But they were just seemed like hundreds of people there. And they did not move the plane. I don't know when it was moved because I was in school the day it was moved. But I can remember as a 6-year-old seeing what the property looked like after all those people had been there. Fire trucks had cut fences in 2 or 3 different places. It was a warm time of year when they moved the plane, and it left tremendous ruts in the field from there to the road. And it was only about 100 yards from the house to the plane, and about 50 yards or less to the road. But they took it straight out to the road. And you got to remember, back then, this was 1947, and we didn't have a tractor till 48. So Daddy had to work that down with mules. So that's how I can remember.
So I want to say he's been very generous He's always, we've been out there 2 or 3 times.
I sold it in '83, but I'm still pretty tight
With him, okay.
Yeah.
You never had told us we can't come out there.
No.
So I appreciate that. And then,
I can't tell you a lot. Joe has told you most everything, and it was a winter day, and like I said, he was home from school, and I remember he was eating popcorn, and my mother was trying to entertain him by playing checkers, and we were, at first, there was all kinds of things hitting the roof of the house. It sounded worse than any hailstorm I'd ever heard. So we immediately left our seats and went to the window. And I remember looking out, and of course there was insulation and pieces of the plane falling, small pieces. And I stayed at that window till it turned dark that day. So later on, when I was allowed to go out, I remember that summer we played with the small aluminum pieces that had come from that plane. Mother didn't want us to. I think she thought they were radioactive. And of course, like you said, the roads were packed with people. And my father was in town, and he was coming home, and I can only imagine what he thought when he got that near to the farm and saw that many people. I think that's all I know. Thank you.
Well, I'm Dewey Burnett, and I remember in 1948, I was 7 years old almost. And my father and grandfather, my grandfather's old 36 Chevrolet used to come out and pick me up at the road because we were on the Witt Road, and our farm was back off the road. So they would just come out to pick me up, and I was walking toward the car when we heard this big noise. And so we all looked up, and you could see the plane coming down, and it was spinning. And one wing came off of the plane and went in Willie Black's farm by his pond. The tail section went down, we could see it fall off, and then we heard the plane crash. So we immediately got in the car, and I guess we were probably the first people there, because I never will forget, there was a few neighbors walking across the field, and we were there, saw the plane. And I'm standing as close up here to you from the plane, looking at it, and I remember seeing the pilot sitting in the plane, and I thought, well, maybe he's just going to get up and walk out, He was still strapped in. I remember one boot being beside the plane, and he had the other boot on. I remember Harry Booker coming by in a little bit and taking him out of the plane, and they put the parachute over him at that point in time, and so that was about it. But I was one of the few people that was first on the scene, saw everything. I remember it to this day, trust me. Never forget something like that. Okay, that's all.
how amazing is it that there's 3 people that still, I don't know what's in the water down here, guys. That's 75 years ago, and they look like they're 63. Crying about Tommy, and he just felt it was on his heart to tell us what happened. So I have to go by what his word is, because he was an Air Force control tower.
I got 2 quick questions. Has there been any estimation made on how fast the object was going? And do you remember what it felt like when you were first told that your grandfather died chasing a UFO?
Yeah. The first question, I believe, someone could correct me if they had the speed right, but I think he said it would look like it was going about 250 or 300 miles. I know at the time the P-51 was the fastest plane, and I know he had it humming. And he chased this thing for a while. The weather balloons, again, they get released. Well, the weather balloons, where do weather balloons get released at? Military Air Force bases. So I don't see how there would be 3 generals looking at something and saying, what is that? When they see a weather balloon get lifted off all the time. Second question is funny, because I tell you what, when I was little and I would go to school and I was like, whoa, guess what? My grandfather got shot down by a UFO. It was not, I think I got picked on a little bit. So the internet and Google definitely helped And articles definitely help. But like James was saying, now it's gone from that when I was a little kid where I would say something to somebody about it and there just wasn't a whole lot of information, where now the guy reached out from Chile and basically said I can come to Chile and he would pay for it all and just to interview me. And then there's back in the early 2000s, I saw somebody on Twitter and there was a musical group and it was called Captain Mantell. And it looked like just like your thing out there. It had an airplane and so like a flying saucer. And so I contacted this guy and he was in Italy and I was like, why are you using my grandfather's name as your, but the guy's name was Camilli Mantelli. I mean, it was almost as close as you could get to Thomas Mantell, and he could not believe he was talking to Thomas Mantell's grandson. He's like, I dedicate my whole music for you. If you ever come to Venice, consider yourself a brother. It's just so this story that's in Franklin is so big that, man, I know I carry a lot of pride with it, but you guys should have a lot of pride with it too and be, I mean, it's special. But yeah, it wasn't fun.
Is there any reports or anything on the deposition of the wreckage after they took it out of the field? I'm sure it was.
What Blackwell said was that when the plane, all those people were in the tower when the chase was happening. He said when the plane went down, the red tape was horrible. They came out. Apparently, they took. Put yellow tape around it. The Air Force came out, put it on the back of a pickup truck, I guess.
They had an 18-wheeler. They came and picked up all the parts, wing parts, the tail section, and the plane, and all the parts they could find.
Dad said when they came and picked the plane up, it was weather like we're having today. The ground had got a lot softer. Well, they didn't have a backhoe back in, but this thing left a tremendous hole. So they took the scrap that they didn't want to fly off of the truck going back to Fort Knox or somewhere, and they threw it in that hole. Shoveled a little dirt on it. There was 2 holes that stayed there till 1974, when I cut some timber there and had some stumps moved and it all leveled off. But those 2 holes were like, I don't know how to say, both of them together would cover the size of an automobile. One of them was a little bit deeper than the other. And anytime it rained, water would stand there for some time. But it stayed like it till
74?
That's when I
okay.
Got rid of some timber, leveled it all up, smoothed it up.
Wow.
And we do have a small piece of the plane back in our exhibit back here that was picked up down the road, I think, by Alma Snyder, or at least on their farm.
Well, I wished I'd been able to keep the big piece we had. We had the tail section that stood about this tall. And I was probably about 8th or 9th grade. Preacher that was preacher of the First Baptist Church here, Davis, his son was going to Western, and he came out and wanted it. They was going through some testing on it at Western. This was probably 1956, and we never did get it back. It would have been a nice piece.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
If they scraped all the plane down into the ground and covered it up, do you think there's still some in there?
Well, we found some with serial numbers on it. That was late 90s. I'm not sure. I'm sure if you went back out there with some equipment, there's a good chance you probably could.
We now have a ground penetrating radar machine that Billy has been using to find graves and other things, and I know he's interested in trying to get out there.
Yeah. If you guys do, if anybody does that, I'm just in Louisville, so I'll come down and put on my treasure hat. So that would be exciting. Any other questions? Anybody have any?
I have a question that lets you know that I went to the crash after. We were 3 miles on the other side of 31 West. And went on out of the Air Force. And you said, listen back, you built the tractor off, we could hear the plane. I never did see it. I was 6 and holding on to the truck. But he, said that plane's gonna crash. And we went to the house, and he took me over there. And hell, if I was there, we probably an hour after that. But I remember the engine laying out on the ground, working on it. I remember the body covered with white, clear cloth, or white cloth, or solid cloth.
I think they said parachute.
Parachute. Plane was, part he was talking about, still there. Just the corner and the people were there. I was 6 and all that. I saw that engine. I thought, that was like an engine. He hurried over the old tractor room. And he saw it. I can imagine, he said it was unlike all the strike.
Yeah, the report was that he got too high up, passed out, and crashed, chasing the weather. It was basically what they basically came down and said it.
Terry, I hope you get this movie made.
Well,
I would love to see.
We got a bunch of people from the government. We can try to push it, but I think
would love to see the love story of your grandfather.
Oh, I love it.
That would be great. And
when I was younger, I used to say, I can play him, and Jenny McCarthy can be my nana. But now I think I'm too old to play it.
I hope you are able to get the movie made. I think it would be a great story.
Yes.
And we would love if some of it could be filmed right here.
I would. I'd make sure.
Megan's here from tourism, so she can get that started.
I cannot, but maybe we can talk though.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know you'd have to have a transcript, and I know it's. But I think if anybody would give it 10 minutes to listen to the story, but the love story, man, what a shame, what a powerful love to have your husband make it through World War II, and you had 2 little boys, and then only for him to die. My grandmother, she's a strong woman.
How old was your grandmother when this happened to them?
Well, my grandfather's 25, and I believe she was a year or 2 younger than him, so 24, 23.
And her sons?
My dad he was born in 46 in September, so he would have been about 1.5. And my Uncle Tommy was about 3 years older than my dad.
That was really hard for your grandmother.
Extremely hard.
Oh, yes.
And it was hard because there was no answers provided by the Air Force. And again, like I said, I think everybody tries to do what's right. Hopefully they do what's right at that time. And I just don't know how they could approach this. It was tragic. It's the guy that I talked to that podcast yesterday was like, man, my whole life I've been studying this, and I've always thought about UFO and the chase and what possibly could have happened, and what possibly this and how fast and how big and did they see anything? But he said, talking to you as a human, you know. So
I have kind of a 3-part question. So the officials that came to recover the site, recover the wreckage, did they come back at any point later on, and did they talk to any of the eyewitnesses and try to stifle any information, and did they come talk to your family and try to?
They never talked to our family. I do know, I can speak for them. I don't think they came
Once
out.
the plane was gone, that's it.
It was gone. It was almost like we're going to sweep this under a rug. It didn't happen. And that's
Typical government.
So it's unfortunate. And like Blackwell said in the interview, he said, the red tape was bad. And what he said off camera was that, there's people dispersed from Godman Field at that time, and basically was said, we're not talking about this.
Terry, you may have mentioned this, but I found it interesting, typical government, that when they said it might have been a skyhook balloon that had been launched from Ohio, and they went back to check the data to see if there had been a balloon launched at that time.
It was December.
They said that something had been spilled all over those weeks' records, so they actually couldn't see whether there had been one launched or not.
Doors.
Again, I definitely don't want to get on the government or the military, because I think we have the finest, strongest, bravest group of men and women in the world. and I'm thankful for what they did. I'm thankful that I can drive down to Simpsonville and talk about an incident where in some countries you would not be allowed to talk about it. So I am thankful for that. I just wish that we as a family would have had so much peace brought to my grandmother, my dad, and my uncle. Of course, I was not even thought of, but that one event really, and really Thomas Mantell's mom, Grandma Mantell, to her dying day, tried to figure out what happened. The connection between him and my grandmother was so strong. The letters, and he would just write, and she was her only boy. And the family, Tommy, everybody loved Tommy. You know, he was a war hero. He was good looking. You know, they call him Shiny because he was always smiling. One of his best friends said, if you want to have a good time, hang out with Thomas Mantell because you're going to have a good time. I don't matter if you have money or no money. You're going to have fun. So the world lost somebody that I thought would have probably continued to Korea in 50. I think he probably would have gone to Vietnam, and at that age probably would have either trained or even probably flew in Vietnam. I probably wouldn't even be here today. The odds of my mom and dad meeting were probably slim because they probably would have moved. So the ripple effects there, like I said, I told you about my uncle in Indonesia who's been a missionary for 30 years. He wouldn't have been born. My other uncle wouldn't have been born. So there's that butterfly effect. That's why I kind of tie it back into faith. And I can wrap it up if anybody, I don't know how long you want this to go, but if there's any questions you can ask me. But I have to hold on to my faith because at the end of the day, that's all we have. We don't know the story. It's something to be very proud of you guys being here. I can't thank you enough. I was worried that there might be only 5 or 10 people here. I would have still been proud. I was still talking. I still would have thanked you. But having you guys come out on a Tuesday night and listen to a story that happened 75 years ago and having all these people that come in, I would love afterwards if I could just stand by and take a picture with each person, maybe about a flag. Because again, this is a beautiful thing. I love having it shown. So any other questions? And if not, I'll turn it over. Go ahead.
My brother-in-law couldn't be here tonight, but he wanted me to ask a question of you. The government, I'm reading what he wrote me. The government just raised the number of sightings to over 500 just since 2021. Many are reports from military aviators, but they hasten to add that no aviator has ever been injured as a result of an encounter. Didn't witnesses here say they heard a crash above them before pieces of the plane fell to earth?
Well, there's no doubt that he was injured. He was in a crash in a UFO. They didn't know what it was. Now, was it space aliens? Was it ET? I don't know. I don't know about that. It's some things I'm not supposed to know, and that's just higher than my thinking. But he was the first military person killed chasing a UFO. Again, a UFO, we think of it as an ET, but this is something that was unidentified, flying object. And he was the first Kentucky Air National Guardman killed in service. So if someone's reporting that, saying that there hasn't been, they are just flat out forgetting Thomas Mantell, which again is what we're trying not to do. With so many people, it's amazing when I talk about it to people and they never heard of it. I got a thing from the governor. I won't read it. It's an acclamation from Andy Bashir. And I went to Frankfurt to pick it up the other day. And the lady said, the governor was like, wow, that's a story. She said, but it all checks out. It's all true, so you have no problem signing it. So there was definitely someone that was killed in that flight.
There was a very similar crash in Michigan 2 years later involving Monkla. Gene Monkla was the pilot's name. Very similar crash, and he died too.
Yeah.
So that is not true, what they're saying. That is definitely
that's what he was thinking there for something.
That's two within 2 years that I know of, where pilots died.
Again, I hope the government, I think the government always tries to protect us, and sometimes I don't know how the common person might respond if they think that we was under a serious threat that we couldn't. Because in that interview that I did in New York City on the ABC, he asked, do you think that they could be hostile, which was basically what our show was called Alien Endgame. And I basically said if there was something up there chasing, if they do have the means to get here, and if they were hostile, we wouldn't stand a chance. So let's just keep praying to God that He protects our nation, that there's a revival, and that we just keep loving people where they are, right? So that's what I try to do.
Terry, I did hear an explosion before the plane started coming down. I heard the explosion. And if you think about the particles hitting the house, I don't think a plane coming down, particles are going to come off like that and hit a house, not small pieces. To me, it had to be a UFO which blew it out of the air. And we saw it. I saw it. My father and grandfather. And I saw the plane coming down after the explosion. You heard it. And you could hear the plane making that noise, going down, the wings coming off. It definitely was.
Yeah. I'm thankful that there's witnesses here. It's amazing. Any other questions, comments?
What happened to the witness?
I would say that's why I said I've never seen a report of an interview. They had a lot of reports that people signed off and said they saw and whatnot, but if you look at them, there's never was like a handwritten signature of someone signing off on those reports. I've never seen an interview with this one, and I would guess that they'd probably be 100 or so.
Do you know his name? Like, have you tried to reach out to the family?
I had not. Clemente, I think, was one of them, and the other one, I can't remember. There was 4 of them. One of them did return, and then the 2 that was with him, I'm not sure. I would have thought that maybe someone that they would have passed it down to their grandkids, maybe a call from a grandkid or something. But if it goes back to them being told not to say nothing about this at all, again, the military tells you do something, you usually do it. If, that's just what we do. Or that's what they do. I'm not military. Questions or?
Just a statement. Thank you for your grandfather's sacrifice, and God bless your family.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Again, I can give names with a big hand too.
Anybody got any other questions before we quit?
Before we close, let's have a moment of silence.
Thank you. And hopefully we remember not only this family, but we have men and women around the world, as well as here, that are willing to sacrifice their life just like Captain Mantell did. And not only military, but we have law enforcement, first responders that are willing to do that. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those groups.
That's right.
So we appreciate it. Again, if you would like to look at that exhibit or any of the other exhibits, if you haven't been in here, it's quite a treat in the back. And if you really want to go upstairs, we'll show you the part we've got upstairs. We've had quite a bit, and the story of Captain Mantell is really interesting. And if you look it up, there are a lot of things where people have said things that we find out are not true in any way, but there's so many of them that are true. And I think Eric, maybe even a little more than Terry, really wanted closure when they came here for the filming of this Ain't an End Game, but there's no closure to be found. Now, I know our congressman is on the oversight committee, so they may investigate. I think some of those committees are investigating UAPs now. They're calling them instead of UFOs. They're unexplained aerial phenomenon, but it's the same thing. So we may find out something. And if you haven't watched that video, watch the Franklin part for sure. It's the good part. It's got my hands in it. It's got a whole lot of Terry in it. But if you watch that whole 2 hours, it's kind of interesting, some of the things that these former military guys say. Now, who knows? We don't know what's out there, but like we say, we just keep praying.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all again for coming, and please come back. And like I said, if you haven't looked around, look around. If you don't have time tonight, come. And we've got the building across the street too with the old jail. So, help yourself. There's some cookies, coffee, and water back in the back.